First item on our agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Height. Commissioner Tedda. Here. Commissioner Poland. Here. Commissioner Schernick.
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg. Here. Commissioner Tetzlaff. Here. Councilmember Rodriguez.
All right, next is communications from Planning Manager Don Burchett. He has none. Next is the public invited to be heard. This is for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. If there's anybody in the public who would like to come forward and speak, we'd love to hear from you. Yep. Okay, all right. Seeing nobody, we will close the public invited to be heard. There will be a second one of these at the end of the meeting. We're checking on whether our alternate, who just arrived, would like to sit in on the meeting. All right. Sarah Levison has joined as our alternate member, so we now have 7 members on the commission, and that's at 7:01 p.m. for the record for Jane. Next is approval of the meeting minutes from April 25. Is there any discussion about the minutes? I should note that as you saw from an email from Jane, I asked for just a minor modification to be made, so we're voting on that version, not the original version sent. Any discussion? Commissioner Goldberg?
I'd like to move approval of the modified minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second? A second. Seconded by Commissioner Tedda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody abstaining? Abstaining. 1, 2, 3 abstain. Any nays? No nays. So that would be 4 in favor and 3 abstained. So the minutes are approved. Then we move to item number 6, Jeremy's Garage Variance, PZR 2018-5 with Senior Planner Karen Bryant.
Chairman Schernick, Planning and Zoning Commissioners, Karen Bryant, Planning and Development Services. So the application before you is variance to 2 separate code sections within the Land Development Code. Both have to do with protection standards and special standards to make sure that uses are compatible with each other. So the property is located, there's actually 2 separate addresses. One of them is 900 Sunset, and that's what Boulder County Assessor's Record will tell you. And that's the entire property covered in red. The variance, the application before you is just for the portion of the property in the blue rectangle. And in the staff report, it was listed as that being 1,300 Kansas, and it's actually 1,600 Kansas, and I do apologize for that. But we're not looking at the entire property, just the portion in the blue. The remainder of the property contains self-storage and another use, but we're just focusing on the area in blue. So the specific proposal is 2 separate reductions. And the reason for that is because the protection standards require 250 feet from an auto repair facility between residential zoning areas and also schools. So just here really quickly, the star is the location of the property. And so they're asking for a reduction in the 250 foot by 65 feet from the residential zoning district to the building itself. So they're about 185 feet away. So the variance that they're requesting is the minimum that they would need, 65 feet. And the second one is a reduction of 95 feet from the school, which the Career Development Center for the St. Vrain Valley School District, and that is right across the street. That one is about 155 feet from the building to the property line, and it's 95 feet. And because all of the activity that will be happening that requires the buffer is going to be done inside the building, staff and the applicant measured that variance request from the building itself and not the property lines. It's in more detail in your staff report, and I can answer any questions that the commission might have, but staff did find that the application complies with both the common review criteria for all applications as well as the review criteria for variance applications. The Planning Commission, you are the decision-making body for this application, and so your options are to approve the variance, conditionally approve it, or deny it. And staff is recommending approval of the variances with the two conditions that are listed up there. And this is this recommendation is reflected in PZR 2018-5B. And the applicant does have a presentation to give the commission, and I think my suggestion would be maybe to hold off on questions until after they've given their presentation.
Okay, thank you, Planner Bryant. Let's go ahead and see the applicant's presentation, please.
Just click. Okay. Commissioners, thanks for seeing us tonight. I just got the staff report this morning, so you're basically going to hear the same thing twice. I apologize for that. I didn't have a lot to add to what Karen has here. We're Jeremy's Garage. This is everybody associated with us, basically, minus one other employee. I'm Dave Borner. Jeremy Schatz and Jeremy Leadham are also partners in the business. Been doing this for 3 years in Longmont. This is just a picture because we wanted a reason to fly a drone. This is what the building looks like up high. These are the specific use standards outlined in your staff report. I won't read them to you, you guys probably know that, but basically the guts of it is specific use standard 16, our point of view in regards to the school part of it. Two things, and I'll show you some pictures of basically the CDC does what we do, and they already kind of look like an auto repair shop from a distance. And Stoneham Automotive is also already operating within the buffer of that school. And in regards to the residential standard, pictures will show it's a very industrial area where this residential neighborhood came in. That is a challenge, and I think one of the commissioners had a question for the uses that are industrial and which would be permitted and which would require this variance, and it was overwhelming. I think there was 8 uses that are considered industrial that would be permitted without any sort of variance or condition, and probably 100 that would not. So it's a very industrial area already, and the CDC is already doing what we do closer to the neighborhood than we would be. So this is the zoning map just to kind of outline. It's very industrial over there. That's kind of just what everything is. This is also a slide from your staff report. This is how close we are to the CDC, and other slides will show the new residential buildings. So we know that I guess the way that the regulations are written, it's from the building to the property line, but we did want to demonstrate that to the actual buildings, we do have significantly more distance. Also, because of the way the building's set up, this is a picture of the new building back here. We're going to be doing the work in the back area of the shop, which is actually more than 250 feet also from where the majority of the noise will be coming from. Also, because of the way the building's set up, the noise and work is going to be happening even further away and projecting away from them. You could see this right now, just right off of Kansas Avenue. This is what the CDC looks like. We have things in our chain link fence that would hide anything like this, and also we're not allowed to, by code, have parts like this outside, which we comply with already. just more aerial views of how close the CDC really back in this area gets to the residential area. And again, vehicles in disrepair kind of everywhere. This is Stoneham and the CDC, the proximity of those two things. Also some more work being performed outside in the mountains. And just generally, I mean, we really take a lot of pride in our business and what we do. People on the internet agree, people that are our customers. This means a lot to us, so we hope you guys take it under consideration. Questions?
Okay. Any clarifying questions, either of Planner Bryant or of the applicant at this time? Otherwise, we'll go to the public hearing section. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing item, so I'll open the public hearing portion of the presentation, or not the presentation, of this item. If there is anybody who would like to come forward, nobody is signed up, but if anybody would like to come forward and make comments, we'd love to hear from you. You get 5 minutes. Anybody? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We will have our discussion and questions, et cetera, from the commission. Don't all jump forward all at once. Okay. Actually, Karen, I do have a question just to clarify in my mind what it is we're deciding tonight. So we're the deciding body, you mentioned. And one thing that I seem never to remember is when a variance is granted, that variance rides with the property itself. So if the use changed, the variance would still be in effect, right?
Chairman Chernick, the way the resolution that you have is that this variance would not run with the property, but with this specific business,
Okay.
Jeremy's Garage.
Okay, so if Jeremy's Garage moves to another location because of growing, and which I hope they do, then we might actually be back, with another variance in front of us for the same location again, for a new tenant who is looking to use the location for a different use.
Correct. The city attorney might be better able to answer that. I'm not sure if it would be possible for you to grant the variance for the property.
Okay.
My understanding of the regulations was that it would be just for this specific development.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Jane, on my applying list, it says Commissioner Kohler. Who should that be? Is that who has requested to speak? Is it Commissioner Poland? Okay. All right. Okay. Commissioner Poland.
Thank you. In reading through the information, it says that back in 2006 is when they zoned that little residential property, which is kind of causing us all the issue here today. Was there any concern or any thought about what that would do with the adjoining properties as far as limiting what could be developed in them? Because it seems that, given the fact that approximately 7% of the ability of the potential businesses in mixed industrial would be excluded, it kind of seems a little odd that they would put that kind of, I don't know, residential there, given the fact that it would cause all this trouble.
Through you, Chairman Chernick, Commissioner Poland. So I was not here in 2006 when it was rezoned, but staff I did review as part of processing this application, that rezoning, and there were some questions and concerns raised about it, but the zoning still went through, and it was rezoned to this residential use.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, fellow commissioners, I've just been advised that the TV folks are having trouble hearing us, so basically eat your microphone when you speak. Okay. Commissioner Goldberg.
Hi, Karen. Would you mind speaking to what sort of feedback you received from the neighbors, the neighborhood? Anything negative that I missed in the deck?
Commissioner Goldberg, so this project, because it needed a public hearing, had notice for a neighborhood meeting. There was no members of the public that attended that neighborhood meeting, and we did not receive any public comments or concerns for the neighborhood meeting. When we received the application, again, notices were sent out. And again, staff has not heard anything negatively or positively about literally no response from the public. And the same thing with this public hearing. Staff is really unaware of any comment one way or the other on this project, with the exception of the letter of support from that was included in your packet from the owner of the property the 900 Sunset property, that they're aware of it and the support.
Thank you.
Commissioner Height.
I will try to talk loudly because I'm terrible at this. Karen, I appreciate staff's review. I'm curious about the recommendation of why you're suggesting that this variance meets the variance criterion. In particular, I'm focused on the unique, as I read the variance requirements, the unique geographic qualities of this property. I think I can see that this doesn't really deviate tremendously from the neighborhood, but the self-imposed hardship component of this standard, which again I read rather strictly, I'm interested in staff's views of why this deserves approval.
Okay, Commissioner Hyde, I'm going to go ahead and address those issues separately. So the first one, kind of with unique geographical area, is that with the exception of the pocket of residential, the entire neighborhood is pretty much that mixed industrial. And when you look at the overall character of the neighborhood and the actual uses that would be permitted or allowed within the zoning district, and so many of them would require the same variance. When I put those two things together, staff felt that it did meet the requirement for kind of that unique geographic area, that it's a property in a mixed industrial zoning. Most of the area around it is mixed industrial zoning. There's this one area of residential. So between the number of uses that would require a variance and the neighborhood character, that's where staff was coming with it, that geographically it was a unique situation. And then and especially with the school being across the street and being very similar in the industry, was another reason why geographically we just felt that it was unique. With it being a self-imposed hardship, that one really went back to the owner of the property themselves. As I mentioned in the staff report, the owner of the property purchased the property in the 1990s, in the late 1990s. At that time, this use, as well as any of the other 70% of the uses that would require a variance, would not have required a variance in most cases. So the residential area was rezoned in 2006. So when you go back to when the property owner purchased it and when the rezoning occurred, I mean, they didn't purchase the property knowing that the rezoning was there, that the residential was there. That came into effect after they had purchased the property and after the area had been this mixed industrial for so long. So staff didn't feel it was self-imposed given the timeline. Now, if the property had been purchased after the zoning, then staff probably would have come back with a different recommendation as it pertains to that criteria.
I appreciate that. again, the unique characteristics of the property aren't terribly unique. It's just a flat piece of ground with some industrial buildings on it. It in and of itself is not unique. It's unique insofar as it's located next to a school and some subsequently rezoned property that's now residential. Is that what you're viewing as, I guess, unique as to where this property is located?
Correct. In this particular instance, depending on the site and the property that you're looking at, this staff in this case is viewing it not as what is the topography or is there drainage or a lot of a really steep slope or something on the property. It's just the actual location of the property is what staff was referring to in looking at it meeting that geographical. Just geographically, its placement within the city and its placement within the neighborhood. You are correct, it is a pretty flat parcel. It doesn't have maybe some of those environmental considerations like a steep slope or a drainage ditch or something else. The other aspect of geographical. So because it's fairly flat and it really was less about what the property looked like as far as slopes and drainage and stuff, but more its location was the issue. That's where it was coming from geographically.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tetzloff.
So my comments, questions are kind of along the same lines of the self-imposed. I know for me, looking at this, it feels like we're trying to grant a variance more for the property owner than the use itself because of a jam that the property owner got put into back in 2006. And so going to this and the fact that we're instead granting the variance for this particular use and they could leave, and we'd have to go through all this again. I like maybe Commissioner Height am struggling a little bit with self-imposed hardship because this particular applicant did know, hopefully before, hopefully this is part of the due diligence period, know that the property needed to be 250 feet away. And so I don't know, I don't know if I'm eating my mic enough either. I know for me personally, that's going to be the hard one to get over is the self-imposed hardship part. I mean, and this is one of those situations where the use probably makes 100% sense in every other aspect of every other criteria for me, but I don't know if I've heard and read enough to get over the self-imposed hardship myself at this point. So,
Commissioner Teta.
I disagree. I think that if we're talking about self-imposed hardship, I believe it's the residential stuff that is self-imposed. They came late to the party, and the industrial use zoning was already there. I seem to recall that we tried to squeeze as many or help them squeeze as many of those residential properties in as possible because we like the price point. I remember fudging the frontage, I believe, requirement, and we could have easily just not had that single residential structure built right where it is, which affects this particular property in a negative way. It seems entirely appropriate to me for the area, and I don't have a problem with the variance at all.
Other comments, questions? Commissioner Goldberg.
Hi, Karen. Did we hear back from the St. Raymond Valley School District regarding this project?
Commissioner Goldberg, we did send them a referral, and they were in support. They felt it was compatible with the Career Development Center that was immediately adjacent to it. They did mention that if it had been something like an elementary school across from the street or a middle school, and I'm sorry I did not include that referral in your packet, the referral response in your packet, but really they were okay because it was the Career Development Center. If it had been an elementary school or some other type of school, they probably would have objected to it.
Commissioner Levison.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. I just wanted to double check, Planner Bryant, is there an organized neighborhood with this notice, or was it just to property owners, and were there actual built houses within the 300 feet? Or are the properties that were within 300 feet owned by the developer still?
Commissioner Levinson, we did send a notice to the developer and the neighborhood group. All of the ones within 300 feet were still owned by the developer.
So the actual, just to clarify, so actual no actual resident homeowners got the notice?
Correct. I think there might have been one or two. Let me look at the list. I think there might have been one or two, but for the most part, it was, we only, because of the limited thing. So I'm going to, hold on one second. It looks like only one property owner, two actual residences received notice. The rest went to the developer.
So I think that when we have a neighborhood meeting and two people who are living in houses that are less than 3 years old get notice, they may not be really aware of how this development process works with the city. And I would just suggest that we should clarify the record to not just give the blanket that nobody from the neighborhood showed up, because if there's a less sophisticated, organized neighborhood group leader situation, they may not know how to respond to development application or to go and tell the rest of their neighbors that this is happening. That's my only concern, is to have that clarification, because what happens to the property owners of those currently undeveloped lots? I mean, are we going to give them fair warning, like the people in the airport noise zone, that they're moving into something that's adjacent to industrial area? I guess people they're supposed to do their due diligence when they're purchasing a home. That's my only sticking point, is that the people that would be the most affected by granting the variance are voiceless, because there are no houses there. It's an empty lot. And the developer probably doesn't care one way or another. That was my only question to get clarified.
City Attorney Kramer.
Thank you, Chair Shernick. I wanted to get back to your earlier question about when a variance goes away. So the variance would be tied to the property, and it would only lapse when there was a substantial redevelopment of the property, as determined by the Director of Planning and Development Services.
So it is tied to the property. It's not tied to the use. So if the use, if Jeremy's moves out in a couple of years and the use changes, then the variance still exists. So does that mean that any of these out of Karen's list, out of anything that would require the setback, the same setback requirement, they wouldn't have to go through a variance process for any of these other uses?
So I believe under the code, a change of use is a development application.
Okay.
So the question would be a judgment call as to whether it's a substantial redevelopment.
Okay. All right. So it could be reviewed again.
Could be.
Potentially. Okay. All right. Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Teta.
To Commissioner Levison's points about the notice area, I know this isn't the time or the place, but I think it might be appropriate to recommend that they be reconsidered or expanded, especially in situations like this. I would have liked to have seen every homeowner in that new development noticed, and chances are we still wouldn't have seen a whole bunch of them out. Who knows? But why not? What are there? 200 houses? How many houses could there be? You know, I think I think we get caught up in the letter of the law sometimes with the notice stuff, and the idea behind it is to let anybody who might be affected and who might reasonably be supposed to care one way or the other weigh in. And if we hide behind, well, we did everything within a certain number of feet, that misses the point.
Appreciate the comments about the noticing, but I believe that it's been established that proper notice has been given on this particular project. So, those are, as Commissioner Teta said, that's a different issue. It's basically an aside, just for clarity for the record. Commissioner Height.
I do have to go by the letter of the law. And when I look at Municipal Code Section 1502.050J5, which says that the decision-making body may only grant a variance if we meet these certain qualifications, and that overall the development will result in the denial of the application of the code would result in undue hardship and practical difficulties for the owner of the property. In this particular instance, I think the applicant is a lessee. Can I get clarification of that? So they are going to be a tenant. They are stumbling into a hardship that I can appreciate, and I don't necessarily believe that their activities or what they're proposing is necessarily incongruent with the industrial character of the neighborhood. However, this doesn't meet the standards, in my view, of granting of a variance. There's nothing unique about this property, which is the first criterion that has to be met. That there's some special circumstance regarding exceptional narrowness, the shallowness, shape of the property. These are all geographical descriptions regarding the property that we have to apply to make the application somewhat inequitable. This property doesn't meet that standard. There are other practical difficulty issues when I read through this code that it's close, but it doesn't meet the first standard, so I can't vote in favor of this variance.
Commissioner Poland.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. This is an interesting one. We're being asked as part of the variance to okay a property and okay a variance against a property that is actually doing the same kind of work. And even though I want to do what's right, and I understand maybe by the strictest application of what it says about the uniqueness of the property, and then also about self-imposed. Self-imposed, is it the applicant or is it the owner of the property? I definitely believe the owner of the property, it is definitely not self-imposed. And he would definitely have a hardship because any other property, for the most part, any other use is going to have to come before us, and we're going to have to grant a variance probably one way or another. For the uniqueness, it's not necessarily the shape, but it's location, and I can consider that topographical. I think I said that word properly. Where it's located, because of where they put that residential property, it created a unique situation for what they can do with that property. And because of that, because I think in fairness to everything going on here, I would be willing to go ahead and grant the variances.
Karen, I have a question, and it might be for City Attorney Kramer. So the code does say that, and Commissioner Height was just referring to this, about special circumstances that are exceptional, that would result in undue hardship and practical difficulties for the owner of such property, but the applicant is the lessee. Why didn't the owners apply for the variance? And if the owners aren't here, so are we considering something that the code does not allow us to consider.
So in this particular instance, and whether, oh, I'm sorry, did you want to take it? Just cut you off? No, I was like, if you want to take it, you can take it. I'll wait.
I'll go for it.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen. So, Chair Shernick, I think the answer to that question lies in the definition of applicant in the code. So an applicant can be the record owner of the subject property. It can also be the city. It can also be the developer of the subject property, or a purchaser, or a duly authorized agent of the owner. So the review criteria may say that it has to present a certain problem for the owner, but that doesn't mean that the owner has to be the one who applies.
Okay. So in this particular case, we might consider the applicants to be agents of the owner.
Or developers.
Or developers, yeah. Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for the clarification on that. Other thoughts, discussion amongst the commission? Commissioner Goldberg.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is, again, we're in that conundrum where what feels like the right thing to do is not necessarily what the letter of the law is indicating. Commissioner Tetzoff said this might be 100% the right thing to do here. But Commissioner Height, as he is so excellent at doing, reminded us that the vocabulary in the code prevents us from granting a variance when maybe several of us up here want to. This is also unique in that, we read about, we think about impeding or getting too close to a school. This isn't quite your normal school. The behaviors are in line with what this project would be doing. We didn't hear any negative feedback from the school district. You worry about having an auto repair shop right near a residential neighborhood. But this is a very industrial area, and it was before this residential area went up, and so I find this certainly compelling towards supporting the variance. I applaud Commissioner Levison for raising her concerns about the noticing. It seems like every time we have noticing downright, we find another little curveball that we need to make sure we're covering. And I agree with Commissioner Shernick that the city behaved in the way that we're supposed to. The noticing was done correctly. Again, this is just a unique lot. It's such that only a few actual homeowners receive the notice. Did you have those big pink signs out all around as we're seeing around town these days?
Yes, Commissioner Goldberg, yes, we did. And in fact, there were 3 signs put out for all of those out there. So
great. I applaud the planning and development team for creating those. Those are wildly effective. I don't know if the rest of the commissioners agree.
And also, Commissioner Goldberg, I don't mean to interrupt really quick, but you had a question about an applicant versus the owner. The letter of support that you have is from the letter in there from the property owner. They are aware of the application. They signed the application. So while it's for Jeremy's garage, it's not being done without the owner's consent.
So let me just finish up on some reasoning here. Because the CDC is a different type of school, we didn't hear any negative feedback from the school district because there's another auto shop in the area, because this was an industrial area first, because much of the work will be done right about at that 250-foot threshold, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. Because Envision Longmont acknowledges a preference for infill and redevelopment and utilizing these spaces, kind of moving towards the future, because the city presented, albeit maybe not a compelling story for every member on the commission, but certainly a few reasons why this would comply with a variance, consistent with the comp plan, design standards, intent of the zone, not adversely impacting surrounding areas. For all of these reasons that we listed, though certainly taking into consideration Commissioner Height and Commissioner Tetzloff's concerns, I think I'll be supportive of this variance.
Commissioner Levison.
The advantage of living in town a long time is that you have this historical memory. As far as the closeness to the residential area and homes, I would also remind people that there was Trepke's Tire Town on the corner of Longs Peak and Main Street. And as a person who lives just a couple of blocks from there, it was actually a very convenient thing to get your car repaired around the corner. You could walk and drop it off, drop it off and walk home and then go pick it up. So I'm not saying that we should not look at granting the variance because it's totally incompatible with having residential close by. In fact, I think it could be useful, if they build relationships in the neighborhood, to have, ready-built clients that would be great long-term relationships, and that might be an advantage for both the shop and the residences. So I wanted to point that out because it's not unheard of in the past in town to have something as a tire store, even on Main Street, in the heart of downtown.
Thank you, Commissioner Levison. That actually, I think, is a good example of how this would meet the spirit of Envision Longmont. Of we're looking for more mixed use parts of the city. Having this sort of neighborhood shop. We've always talked about the neighborhood pub, but the neighborhood auto shop could also be a valid way to go with that. Commissioner Poland.
I'm going to put forth a motion. I move that we approve PZR 2018-5. I move that we approve PZR 2018-5B with the following conditions. 1, the associated change of use site plan waiver application be approved prior to any activity beginning on the property. And 2, the applicant agreed to install all missing landscaping on the property as shown on the original site plan for the property. I will once again reiterate that the two main contending points, the special circumstances included but are not limited to exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of the subject piece of property or exceptional topographic conditions. For me, the fact that they put in a residential zoning within 250 feet of a mixed industrial property piece, to me, that meets that condition. And that also, to me, meets a condition for the property owner that it is not a self-imposed hardship.
Okay, we have a motion to approve PZR 2018-5B. Commissioner Goldberg. Seconded by Commissioner Goldberg. I want to chime in with some thoughts of my own on this. One of the sticking points that I was having was, and this is actually why I asked Planner Bryant for the list of all the uses that would be permitted versus those that needed variances, was because it's in the code that a practical difficulty could be defined if the way it's phrased is that the property will yield a reasonable return, or whether there can be any beneficial use of the property without the variance. Since we've had the discussion about who is the applicant versus who is the owner, when I was reading this, I was thinking, oh, but Johnson Storage owns it. There obviously are other beneficial uses. Karen proved that with her list. There are other uses. But understanding that Jeremy's Garage, the applicants here tonight, are basically agents of the owner, they themselves they cannot derive a beneficial use without the variance because they can't do the other uses that are allowed without a variance. They are a garage. That's all they do. They aren't a veterinarian, which is one of the permitted uses. So that solved that issue for me. So I think I don't see that as an impediment. Any further discussion? Let's take a vote. Okay. It looks as though we're okay. Okay. So it is passed 5-2 with Commissioners Tetzloff and Height dissenting. So let me read the notice here. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period, which begins Thursday, May 17 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, May 23rd at 5 p.m. I want to thank the folks from Jeremy's Garage for coming tonight and doing your presentation and answering questions for us. Really appreciate it. Thank you to Senior Planner Bryant for her presentation and preparation of the package and providing us with additional information as requested. We will move on to our next agenda item. Okay, next on our agenda is the final call for the public invited to be heard. I think there is no public left since the folks from Jeremy's Garage have left. But I see no one coming forward. Nobody's signed up, Jane? Okay, we will close the public invited to be heard. Any items from the commission? Seeing none. Any items from Council Representative Aaron Rodriguez?
Thank you, Chair Shernick. Just wanted to say that due to the conversation and basically the impetus to the variance request tonight, as you have already mentioned tonight, one of the goals of Envision Longmont is infill and redevelopment. And this is a concept of infill that created this necessity for a variance. And so as we're going forward, I think that's something that City Council should be very cognizant of as we're looking to aim towards this, as well as creating these kind of mixed-use walkable pod kind of concepts of neighborhoods. And so I think that I will be definitely bringing this up as a major point in our council retreat this weekend. And as always, thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any items from Planning Manager Don Burchett?
Thank you, Chairman Shernack. Just a couple things. We may need 2 meetings in June. Right now we have a potential for 7 development applications to come before you guys. We'll know more by the end of the week. And so just a friendly warning on that. One of the things I wanted to point out along the lines of the project tonight with the new development code that we're looking at is that on an example with this type of use, we're modifying that 250-foot restriction, and we're actually changing those uses to where they would become a conditional use versus being just outright not allowed unless you get a variance. And in that way, the commission can consider the impacts to the adjacent neighborhood and, any feedback that you get from the neighbors to try to address or mitigate any concerns that may be generated from this kind of a use. So hopefully it's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to alleviate the need to try and process these as variances, and then also give the commission the ability to look at it really for its impacts to the adjacent properties and try to figure out what kind of conditions make sense to mitigate those concerns from either the neighbors or that you identify in your review, just looking at the plans. And then the last thing I just wanted to share with the application was that the 2 structures that are the residential townhomes that were within the notice area, neither of those have any C of Os issued yet. So there are not any existing people for us to notice, either be to the resident, as we've talked about in these areas where due to the Boulder County records not being updated very quickly to send out occupant ones, the occupants would have gone to an empty building where no one was living anyway. So, you know, we do have the signs up. We're hopeful that people who are visiting their future homes, you know, as they're driving by the construction site trying to see how things are going, that they would notice those signs and hopefully reach out to us. So I just wanted to kind of give you an update on those things for you. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much. Unless there's any objections, we're adjourned. Thank you.